Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda and I'm so glad that you could join me today. So in my last presentation, I was discussing about the Jewish dietary laws or keeping kosher and kashrut, and that's all that's involved with that and the different regulations and things like that. Now, we know that in Christianity, there are not very many, if any, dietary laws. Some believe that during Lent, they don't have meat on Fridays, but that's really the gist of it. So today, we're going to take a look at Islam and some of their dietary laws, because the more you know, the more you grow. So let's go ahead and jump into discovering about the dietary laws in Islam. So Islam, like most religions in the world, have different rules for their followers to abide by. And this also carries through into their dietary habits. The Islamic culture in general is very conscientious of what they ingest into their body and what they utilize to take care of their bodies. So they have some very strict rules, but a lot of them are also quite similar to the kosher laws that the Jewish community utilizes. So sometimes you'll see people who are Muslim or practicing the Islamic faith, and they will utilize the symbols with the kosher laws because they're a little more common to see on food items, particularly here in the United States. You can find different things that are okayed for the Islamic faith in the United States, but it's sometimes more challenging to find. So let's get started. So in general, the foods and in Islam, it doesn't just apply to their food. Like I said earlier, it's more encompassing than the Jewish dietary laws. So in Islam, they are looking at items as either halal or allowed or haram, which is prohibited, okay? And this applies to things they drink, things they eat, the ingredients within the foods they eat, foods that contact different materials, particularly like at a manufacturing place, medicines, how the animals that are going to be eaten were raised. So what if they were going to eat a cow, for example, what was the cow fed? That matters. It carries through to medicines. It also carries through to cosmetics. So that's different than even the kosher dietary, the kosher rules of Judaism. Okay, so let's take a peek. So we talked about how typically things are either haram or halal. Haram is prohibited. Halal means allowed, okay? So in the Quran, which is the holy book of the Islamic people, there are multiple verses regarding foods and drinks that are prohibited or haram. Haram, prohibited, okay? This can be found in Quran 2, verse 173, 5, verse 3, 5, verses 90 through 91, 6, verse 145, 16, verse 115. So it's found in a lot of places, but there's basically 6 things that are prohibited. Okay, things that you can't do. This is pork and all of its byproducts. So gelatins, that's a big one. So a lot of, for example, you wouldn't think of it, gummy bears tend to use a lot of pork gelatin to help set the ingredients. Okay, so many gummy things are haram or prohibited. Second, if the animal wasn't slaughtered by Islamic guidelines. So in general, an animal can be raised in one way, but if it's not slaughtered in the correct way, and we're going to talk about that after we talk about the different foods, it can then be haram or prohibited. The third is blood and its byproducts. So they don't eat their steaks cooked rare, things like that. They don't do blood. Okay. They also do birds of prey, and they specify that it's particularly things with talons and any other carnivorous animals, including all reptiles and insects. So that's different than the Jewish custom where most of them are prohibited, but there are a couple that are allowed. In Islam, they are haram or prohibited. They also do not allow alcoholic beverages or other items that may cause intoxication. And this can be carried out different ways, interpreted different ways. So you won't find them consuming beer, for example, or wine, things that are fermented that could alter one's inhibitions. Okay, they don't partake in that. And then the sixth one is they don't partake in foods that include any of the items that were listed previously. So I live in Wisconsin, for example, and in Wisconsin, if you know of anything, we are famous for cheese, brats, and beer. And a lot of times people in Wisconsin will cook their brats with beer, or they'll cook chicken with beer. They like to incorporate beer into multiple foods because they don't ingest alcohol or things that are fermented. They wouldn't cook with beer. They wouldn't eat a chicken brat, for example. Most times brats are pork and they don't eat pork, but they wouldn't eat a chicken brat if it was boiled in beer. That's not something they would do. So anything that combines them would be haram or prohibited. Okay. Now, everything else is halal. And in the Quran, they say their followers are, quote unquote, allowed to eat what is good. And this is found in Quran 2, verse 168. So any food, drink that is identified as pure, clean, wholesome, nourishing, or pleasing. So there you go. You can have chocolate as long as it still meets that criteria. If your chocolate has been created through products that were used for things that were not halal, if you were trying to eat chocolate that also from a plant that also processes chocolate covered crickets, for example, you couldn't eat that chocolate because it uses the same machinery to make the chocolate covered cricket as well as the chocolate that you're eating. That's halal. So basically all fruits, vegetables, and grains, except those that can be fermented to cause intoxication. All beef, all poultry, all lamb are absolutely fine, but they do need to be slaughtered in a certain fashion. We're going to talk about that next. All animal-derived products that are from animals that are allowed. So again, no pork gelatin. You can have beef gelatin, and that's absolutely fine. And all vegetable ingredients except for those that cause intoxication, because there are certain vegetables that you can ferment and it can be used to create wines or beer or things like that, just like you can do that with fruit. They don't allow that you can have the apple. You can't have the apple when it's fermented to make something else. Okay. And then they also say that all permitted, or halal items are seafood. That's different than the Jewish custom. The Jewish people don't allow shellfish, the people who are Muslim or the Islamic followers have absolutely no problem with that. They don't have any restrictions on fish or seafood products in general. So all of them are good. And the above all law or virtue that you want to cover if you are practicing the Islamic faith is the law of necessity when it comes to food. They are supposed to eat halal items whenever possible. However, if something occurs and there are no halal options, it is life before law. So if a person is imprisoned, for example, and all they are ever offered is beer and pork, they feel that that is absolutely fine for them to eat beer and pork because there is no other source that can provide them sustenance. Okay? So, similar to Judaism, halal items have specific markings. I'm going to post them over here. Now, all of these markings, if you look carefully at them, they do say the word halal. Halal. Okay? All of those markings, again, similar to the kosher markings for Judaism, they are different organizations who have certified that product or that manufacturing of that product. They have went to the facilities, they have seen what is there, they inspected the things, they are certified. Now, in Judaism, if you recall, sometimes companies will put a letter K on the product, and that's a general certification where the company deems that their product is kosher. It's just not kosher certified. If a company puts the letter M on a product, that's the same thing, but for halal. It is where the company deems that their product is halal, but it's not been certified from an independent source. Okay? And again, that's kind of a wavery thing. Some people will take the K's and the M's, some people will not, because it's not certified by someone. Okay? And that's okay for companies to put on a packaging because you can't trademark the letter M, or you can't trademark the letter K. You can't trademark letters. So that's there. Now, we talked about the slaughter rules. So in Islam, there are rules regarding how the animal is raised and cared for. Again, talking about halal ingredients, halal medications, things like that. All that has to apply to the animal when it's alive, and it also carries over to when the animal is slaughtered. So it has to be healthy at the time of slaughter. The animal can't be sick in any way, shape, or form. And there's a specific method that is utilized to slaughter an animal in a halal fashion. It's very similar to the Jewish method of slaughter, where you have a certain very sharp instrument and it's a quick, smooth movement around the neck. The difference is in halal, for the meat to be halal, it has to losing the word completely. It has to completely sever the jugular vein. Okay, so it has to completely sever the jugular. Just like in Judaism, the animal has to eliminate all the blood right away after the slaughter. But another change between Islam and Judaism is if an animal is going to be considered halal, it needs to, at the time of slaughter, the name of Allah, which is the Islamic name for God, it must be invoked at the time of slaughter for that meat to be halal. So as they are slaughtering this animal, they have to invoke the name of Allah. Otherwise, the animal is not halal. Okay? Very interesting when I found that out. That they can be raised in a certain way, they can be slaughtered in a certain way, and if they miss one step, or if somebody who is supposed to be invoking the name of Allah is sneezing or they're coughing and they don't have it at the exact moment, that meat is no longer halal. That was intriguing to me. I do, however, like that in the Islamic faith, they don't just take into effect how the meat is killed, but they also take into account how it was raised, the conditions in which it was raised, what it was fed, what medications it was utilized, and the slaughter and the care. I like it. It's more well-rounded. Does that make it more difficult to find ingredients that are halal? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's why a lot of people who are practicing Muslims will utilize the Jewish kosher foods because it's very similar. The only difference is they haven't invoked the name of Allah when they are slaughtering, but they will then invoke the name of Allah when they ingest it. So that's intriguing to me. Now, we also talked, when we did the Judaism food video, we talked a little bit about Passover or Pesach and the different rules and how they change. In the Muslim culture, in Islam, there are days where they have fasting. So where they don't eat or drink anything, and they have different rules for that. There is a whole month in the Islamic calendar known as Ramadan, when this is extremely important to them. This is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. It's what they believe to be the holiest month, because during this intense period of fasting and prayer, which occurs during this 9 month, they believe it to be the month where Muhammad, who they believe was the last great prophet, actually received the holy book of the Quran. So the 9th month is a very important month to them. So during that entire month, tradition says that active Muslims are supposed to fast from food and drink from sunup to sundown for a whole month. They can eat as much as they want from sundown to sunup. But during that daylight time, they're supposed to refrain from eating and drinking and focus more on praying and connecting with Allah. There are exemptions, of course, just like in Judaism when they were fasting days and different things like that. There are exemptions. If you are pregnant or nursing, you're exempt. You don't have to do the fasting. They do say that if you start your menstrual cycle in the middle of a fasting period, you can break your fast, but you are supposed to start your fast again at a later time after your menstrual cycle is done. Whether people choose to do that or not, I don't know that anybody goes around and checks, but that is something that they say. They also say that the children and the elderly are exempt from that. Now, I do know that in certain Muslim families, they will do a different type of fasting for children and elderly. So it might be that instead of having nothing to eat or drink from sunup to sundown, maybe they are restricted to only 2 cups of juice, or maybe they're restricted that they can't have their favorite food, and that's what they're prohibited from during that month. It's different rules for different families, but there's different ways that they interpret it. There's also, if you have a serious illness, if you are diabetic or something like that, you're exempt from the fasting. Again, people sometimes do self I am struggling with words today for some reason. I'm so sorry. Self-appointed restrictions, that might be what they do, but it's not commanded by the Quran. So it's interesting. It's interesting, the dietary laws. Most people in the United States of America, they don't think necessarily, particularly about halal foods and the Islamic culture and their dietary laws. But I would say that more people in the past couple of years have become more aware of the restrictions, particularly during Ramadan. And that's something that more and more people who practice the Islamic faith are participating in, that fasting during Ramadan. In a recent poll in the United States, they say 8 out of 10 Muslims do, in fact, fast during the Ramadan holiday. So, similarities between the Muslim food practices and the Jewish food practices, most definitely. There's also some differences. And it's not a bad thing to have some similarities and differences. It's always great to learn. Because as we say, the more we know, the more we grow. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and I hope you give our video a big thumbs up. And if you like our channel, please subscribe so that you can get new videos when we ever repost them. Until next time, take care.